The prison camp was a place of silence, a silence so heavy that even the wind seemed afraid to pass through. The walls were tall and made of black iron, sharp wires cutting across the sky. Smoke from the guards' fires hung in the air, mixing with the bitter smell of rust and damp stone. Every step in that place echoed hopelessness. Inside the camp, hundreds of prisoners sat in long rows chained to one another. They were humans and aliens, enemies forced together in the same misery. None of them spoke much anymore. Hunger had stolen their voices. Despair had stolen their strength. Among them sat a young human soldier named Daniel. His uniform was torn and covered with dirt. The once bright colors faded into the gray of suffering. His face was thin, cheekbones sharp, lips dry from thirst. He had not seen a proper meal in weeks. Yet there was something different in his eyes. They were tired, yes, but not broken. Behind the dull brown color there was still a spark, a small flame that refused to die. Every evening the guards threw food into the cells. They did not care if it was enough. Sometimes it was old bread, sometimes stale roots, sometimes only a few crumbs. The prisoners had to fight like animals for it. Some guarded their share fiercely, too afraid to lose even a bite. Others, weaker, simply accepted starvation. That evening, when the food was thrown into the cell, Daniel caught a piece of hard bread. It was small, barely enough for a single meal, but to him it was survival. He sat in the corner of his cell, ready to eat slowly, when his eyes fell on someone nearby. Separated by the iron bars of the next cell, sat a figure unlike the others. She was an alien girl, young, maybe close to his own age. Her skin was pale, almost glowing under the dim torchlight. Her hair was silver, falling like soft strands of moonlight across her shoulders. And on her forehead, faint but clear, was a mark, like the shape of a crown. She sat curled up, her knees pulled close to her chest, her hands pressed against her stomach. Her eyes were closed, but her face twisted with hunger. She was trembling, as if her body no longer had the strength to keep itself warm. Daniel stared at her for a long moment. His own stomach growled, reminding him of his hunger. He hadn't eaten since the morning, and even then it was barely enough. Every part of him screamed to hold on to his bread, to think of his own survival, but his heart whispered something else. Slowly, Daniel looked down at the bread in his hand. His fingers shook, not from fear, but from the weight of the choice he was about to make. Then, with a deep breath, he broke the bread in half. Carefully, quietly, he pushed one half through the bars toward her. At first, she didn't move. Her silver eyes opened slowly, blinking in disbelief. She stared at the piece of bread lying just within her reach. Her lips parted, but no words came out. For a long time, she just looked at him, confused, almost shocked that a human, her enemy, would do such a thing. Daniel gave a small, tired smile. "Take it," he whispered, his voice rough from days of silence. Her hands shook as she reached out. She picked up the bread gently as though it were something sacred. Then very carefully she brought it to her mouth and ate. Each bite was slow, like she didn't want the moment to end. She looked back at Daniel, her silver eyes soft but filled with questions. But she said nothing. Not yet. Daniel leaned back against the wall, chewing the little piece he had left. His hunger was still sharp, his body still weak. But deep inside he felt something warm, something stronger than the hunger. He didn't know why, but giving half of his food to her made him feel human again. And in that silent night between two prisoners of war, something unspoken had begun. Something fragile, yet powerful. The spark of a story that would change everything. The night in the prison camp was always the same, cold, silent, and heavy with the weight of suffering. The guards had finished their rounds, their boots echoing across the stone paths before fading into the distance. The fires outside burned low, throwing long shadows that danced against the iron bars. Most prisoners lay down, their weak bodies curling against the ground, trying to find rest in the middle of despair. But Daniel could not sleep. Hunger still gnawed at him, though half a piece of bread had softened it. His back ached from the hard floor, and every muscle in his body begged for rest. Still, his mind was awake. He kept thinking about what he had done, sharing his food with the alien girl. Why had he done it? He wasn't sure. Maybe because she looked so fragile. Maybe because her eyes had spoken a kind of pain he understood too well. Or maybe because deep inside, he was tired of this endless war where kindness seemed forbidden. In the next cell, the alien girl was also awake. She sat against the bars now, her silver eyes faintly glowing in the dark. For a while she just stared at Daniel quietly as if studying him, trying to understand him. At last, when the silence grew too heavy, she leaned closer. Her voice came out soft, almost like a breath carried on the wind. "You're different?" Daniel lifted his head, surprised. For days in the camp, prisoners hardly spoke to each other. Words were too dangerous and trust was too rare. But here she was, whispering to him. "Different?" Daniel asked, his voice rough from disuse. "How?" Her hands rested on her knees as she looked at him. There was no anger in her eyes, no hatred like the soldiers outside. Only a quiet confusion. "You gave me food," she whispered. Her voice trembled, but her words were clear. "Here, no one gives. Everyone only takes. Humans, aliens, it doesn't matter. Everyone is desperate. But you—" She paused, her throat tightening. "You gave, when you had nothing." Daniel let out a tired laugh, though there was no humor in it. "Maybe I'm just a fool. Maybe I should have kept it." She shook her head, her silver hair catching the dim firelight. "No, not a fool. Different." Her words lingered in the air, soft but powerful. For a moment, Daniel didn't know how to respond. No one had called him different before. On the battlefield, he was just another soldier. In the camp, he was just another prisoner. But in her voice, different sounded like something precious. Daniel sighed and leaned his head back against the wall. "I couldn't watch you suffer," he admitted quietly. "I'm hungry too, but I couldn't just eat and pretend I didn't see you." The alien girl's eyes softened, and for the first time a small smile touched her lips. It wasn't a smile of joy, it was fragile, uncertain, but real. In a place filled with misery, even that tiny curve of her lips felt like light. "My people, they told me humans were cruel," she whispered. "They said humans only bring fire and destruction. But tonight you gave me something else. You gave me kindness." Daniel turned his face toward her, his brown eyes meeting her silver ones. He saw no enemy in her gaze. He saw someone just like him, trapped, hungry, tired, but still alive. "Maybe," Daniel said softly. "We're not so different after all." Her smile widened just a little, as if those words touched something deep inside her. She lowered her voice to a whisper again, so soft he almost didn't hear it. "Then maybe there is hope." The night moved on, cold and endless, but for Daniel it no longer felt as empty. For the first time since his capture, he felt seen, not as a prisoner, not as an enemy, but as a human being. And for the alien princess, who had never known kindness in this place, that half piece of bread had become more than food. It had become a bridge. In the middle of war, in the heart of a prison, two strangers had spoken words that no guard, no chain, no hatred could erase. The whisper of something greater than survival, the whisper of humanity. The next morning came slowly, dragging itself across the sky. The camp woke with the sound of boots striking stone and the harsh shouts of the guards. Prisoners were pulled to their feet, chains rattling as they were forced into lines. Another day of labor, another day of hunger. Daniel stood among them, weak but steady. His body ached, his back still sore from yesterday's beatings. Yet his thoughts were not on his pain. They were on the girl with silver eyes. He remembered her whisper, "You're different." The words had stayed with him all night, soft but powerful, like a fire burning quietly inside. As the prisoners were pushed into the work fields, Daniel noticed something unusual. The guards paid special attention to the cell beside his. They glanced at the alien girl often, their expressions harder, their grips on their weapons tighter. She was treated differently, even in a place where everyone was supposed to be equal in suffering. That evening, when the prisoners were returned to their cells, Daniel finally asked the question that had been growing inside him. He sat near the bars, his voice low. "Who are you really?" For a moment she said nothing. She sat across from him, her face calm, though her silver eyes gave away hesitation. Finally she leaned closer, her whisper carrying the weight of a secret. "My name is Elira," she said, "daughter of the High Sovereign, princess of the Arkan Dominion." Daniel froze. His mind repeated her words again and again. Princess, daughter of the Sovereign. He had heard that name before. The Arkan Dominion, one of humanity's greatest enemies in this war. And their princess captured alive? That was more than a secret. It was a weapon. "You're a princess?" Daniel whispered, his voice heavy with disbelief. She nodded slowly. I was taken during the Battle of Kevlar Ridge. My escort was destroyed. I was brought here as a bargaining tool. They keep me alive because I am valuable. If my people ever find this camp, they will trade my life for peace. Daniel's chest tightened. He stared at her, trying to connect the image of this fragile, hungry girl with the powerful title she carried. She wasn't just any prisoner. She was someone who carried the weight of an empire on her shoulders. "You should not have shared with me," she said softly, her eyes glistening. "If the guards see us together, if they think you are helping me, they will hurt you." Daniel gave a tired smile, shaking his head. "It's too late for that. They've already hurt me plenty." He touched the bruise on his side and chuckled weakly. "Besides, I didn't share food with a princess. I shared with someone who was hungry." Her lips trembled and she looked away for a moment, as if his words had cut through walls she had built around her heart. When she looked back, her eyes shone with something unfamiliar. Gratitude. "My people would never understand this." Elira whispered, "We are taught that humans are monsters, that you are cruel and selfish. Yet here you are, with nothing, still giving." Daniel leaned closer, his face tired but sincere. "And what are humans told about your people? That you are heartless, that you want to destroy us. But when I look at you, I don't see an enemy. I see someone just as trapped as me." Elira lowered her head, her silver hair falling forward like a curtain. For a moment she was silent, her hands gripping the bars tightly. Then softly she said, "If my people and yours could see this, maybe the war would be different." Daniel's chest ached at her words. A princess and a soldier, enemies by birth, sharing whispers in a dark cell. It was madness, impossible, and yet somehow it felt more real than anything he had ever known. That night, as the cold wind swept through the camp, Daniel and Elira spoke quietly for hours. She told him about her homeworld, vast oceans that glowed under 3 moons, crystal forests that sang in the wind. He told her about Earth, blue skies after rain, the smell of fresh bread, the laughter of children playing in the streets. 2 worlds, so different, yet in that moment they belonged to the same universe, and as they spoke, the line between prisoner and princess, between human and alien, began to blur. Something new was forming, fragile, dangerous, but powerful. A truth that no war could erase. In the darkest places, kindness could still create light. The days in the prison camp passed slowly, each one heavier than the last. The chains grew tighter, the hunger deeper, the hope thinner. Yet for Daniel, something had changed. Every evening when the guards were not watching, he still broke his food in half. 1 piece for himself, the other for Elira. It became a silent routine between them. She would wait quietly until he slid the bread through the bars, and then she would meet his eyes with gratitude too deep for words. Sometimes she would whisper about her world, and sometimes he would whisper about Earth. In that dark place, those whispers were a kind of light, but light never stayed hidden for long. One evening, as Daniel slid half his bread toward Elira, a shadow moved across the ground. A heavy boot struck the floor and a guard's rough hand shot out, grabbing Daniel by the wrist. "So this is what you've been doing," the guard growled, his sharp teeth flashing as he yanked Daniel forward. "Feeding the princess, are you?" Elira gasped, her silver eyes wide with fear. She pressed herself against the bars, her hands trembling. "No, please don't." The guard shoved her back with the butt of his weapon. Then he turned on Daniel. "Do you know what happens to those who break the rules here, human?" Daniel clenched his jaw. He could already feel what was coming, but he forced himself to stand tall. "If you're going to beat someone," he said through gritted teeth, "then beat me. Leave her alone." The guard laughed, a cruel, hollow sound. "Oh, I will." They dragged Daniel out of the cell, his chains rattling across the stone floor. The other prisoners lowered their eyes, too afraid to interfere. Elira reached through the bars, her voice breaking. "Daniel!" But the guards did not listen. Outside, under the dim firelight, they threw Daniel onto the ground. The dirt was cold beneath his hands, the taste of iron already on his tongue. Then the blows came. Boots against ribs, fists against skin, the crack of bone against stone. Each strike stole his breath, but he bit down his screams. He would not give them the satisfaction. Back inside her cell, Elira pressed her hands to her mouth, tears filling her eyes. She could hear the sounds of the beating, each thud and cry stabbing into her heart. She wanted to run to him, to shield him, but the bars held her back. All she could do was whisper his name over and over, her voice shaking with helplessness. After what felt like forever, The guards dragged Daniel's broken body back to the cell. They tossed him inside like discarded trash, his face bloodied, his breathing ragged. One of the guards sneered. "Maybe next time you'll remember your place, human." The cell door clanged shut, and silence fell again. Elira rushed to him at once, pressing her hands against his torn shirt, trying to stop the bleeding, though she had nothing to heal him with. Her silver eyes overflowed, her voice trembling. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you suffer for me? You could have kept the food. You could have stayed safe. Why?" Daniel coughed, his lips stained with blood, but he still forced a small, pained smile. His voice was weak but steady. "Because no one deserves to starve," he said. "Not even a princess. Not even an enemy." Her hands shook as she held him, her tears falling onto his bruised skin. In that moment, the walls of war seemed meaningless. She was no longer a princess of the Arkan Dominion. He was no longer just a human soldier. They were simply two souls in the dark, clinging to each other in the face of cruelty. Daniel's breath was shallow, his body trembling from pain, but his eyes stayed open. He looked at her, not with regret, but with a quiet strength. And Elira, holding him close, swore silently that she would never forget this moment. She would never forget the soldier who chose kindness, even when it cost him everything. The days after Daniel's beating were heavy with silence. His body was weak, covered in bruises, and every step sent pain through his chest. Yet despite it all, he still found the strength to look at Elira each evening and smile. She, in turn, never left the bars that separated them, always watching him with worried silver eyes. The guards thought they had broken him, but Daniel was still there, breathing, surviving. And in the quiet nights when no one else dared to speak, Elira whispered to him. Her words were soft, carrying stories of hope. She told him of the seas on her world that glowed with light, of skies painted in colors no human had ever seen. In return, Daniel told her about Earth, the smell of rain, the warmth of a hearth, the way children laughed in the streets. They were two voices in the dark, weaving fragile threads of comfort. But peace in a prison never lasted. It was deep into the night when the ground suddenly shook. A roar thundered in the distance, followed by the sharp echo of explosions. The air filled with the scent of smoke and fire. Prisoners lifted their heads in shock. The guards shouted in panic, running to their stations. Then came the blaring alarms. Red lights flashed across the camp. Shadows of ships loomed above the walls, and the sound of weapons filled the air. Someone was attacking the camp. Daniel staggered to the bars, his heart racing. "What's happening?" Elira's silver eyes widened as she gazed at the skies beyond. For a moment, something like hope lit her face. "It's my people," she whispered. "They've come for me." The guards rushed through the corridors, barking orders. Some prisoners cowered. Others cheered faintly at the thought of freedom. But the guards knew the truth. If the Arkan forces were here, they had only one mission: to rescue their princess. Moments later, the cell doors rattled open. Not for freedom, but for fear. Two guards stormed inside, their weapons raised. They grabbed Elira roughly, pulling her toward the exit. "No!" Daniel shouted, slamming against the bars, his weak body fighting against the chains. "Leave her alone." The guards sneered at him. "Stay down, human. She is not yours to protect." But Elira resisted, her voice sharp with command. "Stop! Unhand me at once!" For the first time, she did not whisper. Her words carried the authority of her bloodline. The guards hesitated, startled by her tone. But before they could act further, the walls of the prison shook violently. A blast tore open the gate, and alien soldiers in shining armor stormed inside. Their weapons burned with light, cutting down the guards in seconds. "Elira," one of them shouted, bowing deeply even as battle raged. "Your Highness, we've come for you." The prisoners gasped, realizing the truth at last. The fragile girl beside them was no ordinary captive. She was royalty. Elira pulled free from the guards, her eyes turning immediately to Daniel. He lay slumped against the bars, his face pale, his body trembling with exhaustion and pain. The alien soldiers reached for her. "We must go, Princess." "Quickly." But she did not move. She pointed to Daniel instead. "Take him, too." The soldier blinked, shocked. "He is human."
"He is the enemy."
"We cannot—" "I said take him." Her voice cut like steel. The silver glow in her eyes burned with royal fire. "He saved me when no one else would."
"If you respect your princess, then you will respect this command."
The soldiers hesitated only a moment longer before obeying. They unlocked Daniel's cell, lifting him carefully though his body was broken. His head lolled weakly, but when his eyes met Alira's, there was a spark of recognition. "You're safe," he whispered, his voice thin as paper. She knelt beside him, her hand brushing his bruised face. "No, Daniel. We are safe." As explosions shook the ground, the alien soldiers carried their princess and the human soldier out of the burning camp. Behind them, the prison crumbled. Chains fell. The night sky filled with fire and freedom. And for the first time since the war began, Daniel was no longer a prisoner. He was a man carried not as a captive, but as someone worth saving. When Daniel opened his eyes, the first thing he noticed was the silence. Not the heavy silence of chains and prison walls, but a softer one, the silence of safety. He lay on a bed, a real bed with sheets that smelled faintly of herbs. The air was clean, filled with the sound of distant water flowing, not the stink of smoke and rust. For a moment he thought he was dreaming. He tried to sit up, but his body protested with pain. His ribs ached, his arms shook, and his breath caught in his throat. He winced, falling back against the soft pillow. Then he heard it, a gentle voice. "You should not move yet." Daniel turned his head. Sitting beside him was Alira. She was dressed differently now, no longer in rags. A flowing robe of silver and blue wrapped around her, and a delicate circlet rested on her head. But her eyes, those silver eyes, were the same, soft, warm, and full of worry. "You're alive," Daniel whispered, his voice hoarse. Alira smiled faintly. "Because of you," he blinked, confused. "Me? I'm the one who nearly died." "You gave me your food," she said quietly. "You shielded me when the guards grew cruel. You chose kindness when you had nothing. And because of that, I could not leave you behind. My people would have taken me and left you to die, but I would not allow it." Daniel looked away, his throat tightening. "I'm just a soldier. I don't belong here. Your people owe you their princess." She interrupted softly. Her hand brushed against his, her touch light but steady. "And I owe you my life." Daniel swallowed hard, the weight of her words pressing on him. He had been called many things before, soldier, prisoner, enemy, but never something like this. Savior. As the days passed, healers worked on his wounds. Strange alien medicines closed his cuts and eased his broken bones. Each day, Daniel grew a little stronger, and each day Alira was there. She sat beside him when he rested, told him stories when he couldn't sleep, and smiled when his strength returned. Sometimes, she told him about her childhood, how she used to sneak out of the palace gardens to chase glowing insects under the moons. Other times, she spoke of her duties as a princess, the weight of carrying a whole empire's hope. Daniel listened, sometimes laughing softly, sometimes only nodding in silence. And in return, he told her about Earth, not as a soldier, but as a boy. He spoke of his mother's cooking, of running barefoot through wet grass after a summer storm, of looking up at the stars and wondering what lay beyond them. Alira listened to every word, her eyes shining. "Your world sounds beautiful," she whispered once. "It is," Daniel said. "And so is yours." One evening, as the suns of her world set in golden light, Alira sat close beside him. For a while, neither spoke. Then she whispered the words that had stayed with him since that first night. "You're different." Daniel turned his head toward her. "Different?" "Yes," she said softly. "You are not like the others. My people see humans as fire and destruction, but you gave half your bread when you were starving. You bled to protect someone you were told was your enemy. You are proof that kindness is stronger than war." Daniel's chest ached at her words, though not from pain this time. He smiled faintly, his voice quiet. "Maybe I'm not different. Maybe anyone could choose kindness. Maybe they just forget how." Her hand found his again, gentle but firm. "Then remind them. Remind both our worlds." For the first time in a long time, Daniel felt something stronger than fear or pain. He felt hope, real hope, not just for himself, but for what could come after. And as the stars rose above the alien skies, Daniel realized something. In saving her and in her saving him, they had created something the war could not destroy, something human, something eternal. The hall of the alien council was vast, its walls carved from shining crystal. Light poured down like liquid fire, reflecting off banners of gold and silver. Soldiers stood guard, their weapons gleaming, while nobles whispered among themselves. At the center of it all stood Alira, tall and proud, her silver eyes burning with quiet strength. Beside her, leaning on a carved staff for support, stood Daniel. His wounds were not fully healed, but he refused to lie in bed. He had seen too much, suffered too much to remain silent now. His voice, he knew, could matter. The council leader, an elder with a crown of crystal horns, looked at Daniel with suspicion. "Human," the elder said slowly, his voice echoing through the chamber. "You are a prisoner of war. Why should we listen to you?" Daniel's chest tightened, but he held the elder's gaze. His voice came out steady, even if his body still trembled. "Because I chose to share bread instead of hate." The chamber fell into silence. Even the whispers stopped. Daniel took a slow breath and continued. "I was your enemy. I was meant to fight, to kill, to destroy. But when I saw your princess starving beside me, I did not see an enemy. I saw a person. Hungry, tired, afraid, and I gave her half my food." His hand tightened on the staff. That was not weakness. That was humanity. And maybe, his eyes swept the room, it is what both our peoples need most. Murmurs broke out again, some scoffing, some thoughtful. The elder narrowed his eyes, but before he could speak, Elira stepped forward. "He speaks truth," she said, her voice clear, ringing like a bell. "I was raised to believe humans were cruel and heartless. But this man, broken and starved, gave me kindness. He saved me when no one else would. He is proof that the war has blinded us. We see only enemies, not souls." She turned toward Daniel, then back to her people. "And I will not allow hatred to decide our future. If peace is to come, it begins here. With him." The words struck the chamber like thunder. Some shouted in anger, others gasped in shock. But among the noise, Daniel saw something in their eyes. Doubt. Hope. Questions they had never dared ask. The elder raised a hand, silencing the chamber. His voice was deep, heavy. "If you ask for peace, then you ask for risk. If humans betray us again, it will be your responsibility, Princess." Elira's chin lifted. "I accept." The elder studied her for a long time, then finally nodded. "So be it. The war will pause. Let us see if peace can bloom where blood once fell." The hall erupted, voices clashing like storm waves. But Daniel did not hear them. His gaze was on Elira, who turned toward him with a faint, tired smile. Later, when the council dispersed, they walked together through the palace gardens. Twin moons glowed above, painting the world in silver light. Daniel leaned against the staff, still weak but lighter inside. "You changed everything," he said softly. "No," Elira replied, her eyes meeting his. "You did. With a piece of bread and a choice no one expected." Daniel laughed weakly, the sound surprising even himself. "Funny, all this. From half a meal. Sometimes," she whispered, stepping closer, "the smallest gift carries the greatest weight." They stopped near the fountain, its waters glowing under the moons. For a moment neither spoke. The silence was not heavy nor empty. It was full, alive, carrying words they didn't need to say. Daniel looked at the stars above. For the first time in years, they did not feel distant or cold. They felt alive. They felt like a promise, and in that moment he understood. Humanity's strength was not its weapons nor its fire. It was this, the ability to choose kindness in the darkest places, to give when nothing remained, to turn enemies into something more. The alien princess had said it once in a whisper, and now Daniel believed it with all his heart. Humans were different, and because of that, there was hope.